this morning. I like the way Ryan was going with those songs, reminding us of where we're going to go. I'm sure every one of us wants to go to the Canaan land, and I believe the next song is I'll Fly Away. I think is the next song for that number that I heard. So that's just an awesome theme in those songs. Picking up where we left off last week as far as the book of Daniel, we started to go through the first chapter of Daniel last week, and we seen the ups and the downs of Daniel and his friends as far as being taken into captivity. Now we come into chapter 2, which we'll be looking at here momentarily, and we see the dream that King Nebuchadnezzar has. And he's so bothered by this dream, he even loses sleep. But think about it for a minute. What do you do in your life when the bottom falls out? Maybe of your own life or a loved one that you have. This passage teaches us two important things about God. That number one, He is in control. And number two, His kingdom will never be destroyed. You know, there is something else that we learn from Daniel that is very important and often overlooked in this chapter. And that is how we respond when we find ourselves in a dark and difficult situation. We cannot control our circumstances, but we can control our response to them. That was a line that was used last week in the lesson, and kind of the underlining reason of this series that we're going to be looking at here, going through the book of Daniel. You know, a light in the darkness. Are we going to stand out? Are we going to be the ones that show the world that, hey, even when things go wrong, we can still be happy? Now, that's not to say that if you're a Christian and you're ever sad that you're sinning. But what I'm saying is the outlook that we have. It's our choice on how we respond. Now, you take a look, as I was mentioning, you know, in Daniel chapter 2, 1 through 3, what we see here is that King Nebuchadnezzar is losing sleep. He has this dream that is so consuming that he needs to know the meaning. He wants to know what it means. And in the beginning of the chapter, we have no idea what this dream even is. Now, I'm sure for all of us here that have read the book of Daniel, and we know the stories that are in there, you probably have an idea already of what this dream was. But when you first come to the beginning of this chapter, all we know is this foreign king, this king of Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar, is losing sleep over this dream that he had. Now the king then gives a command to all of the magicians, the sorcerers, the Chaldeans, basically the wise men of the area. And he says, I want this dream to be interpreted. I want to know why my spirit is anxious, as he says in verse 3. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar was willing to do whatever it took to get what he wanted. Now imagine that. One of these things, sometimes when I read some of these stories in the Old Testament, I am so very thankful that I still live in a country that's free. Because some of these kings and some of these decrees, I mean, they could literally, you could look at the king wrong and the king could say, "You're dead. I want you no longer on this earth." But you know, we see that basically the King Nebuchadnezzar says that he wants this dream to be interpreted. He tells them that if they do not, their property will be taken. He goes to the detail of saying they'll even be cut up in pieces. Imagine that, especially if you're a charlatan. Imagine that if the only true power you really have is that you're good at tricking people. Well, they say here in Daniel chapter 2, then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, "O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation." The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, "My decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut into pieces, and your houses shall be made an ash heap." So, do we have a smart king here? I want you to interpret my dream, but I not only want you to interpret it, I want you to tell me what the dream was. You know, I have never taken the challenge of trying to be a dream interpreter, but if my life was on the line and someone gave me a dream, I probably could come up with some story on what that dream represented. One of the other things that I want to point out here is in the next part of this section here, Daniel chapter 2, 10 through 13, the Chaldeans, the wise men, the sorcerers, they're all consumed about themselves. There's going to be a completely different picture that is shown when Daniel comes into this story momentarily. You know, the Chaldeans answered the king in verse 10 and said, "There is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter. Therefore no king, lord, or ruler has ever asked such a thing of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean." There isn't a man on this earth. You know what? That was some truthful knowledge that these Chaldeans just put out there. They're right. There is no man that can do this. Because as we look at Daniel coming up here momentarily, Daniel's going to point out the fact that he can't do it either. But God can. King Nebuchadnezzar at this point is mad. He's upset. He's not only not sleeping. Anyone here ever have a problem with not being able to sleep? Maybe you're stressed out about something. There's a problem in your life, and you just can't get your mind to shut down. You cannot fall asleep. For one night, that's not bad, right? But imagine if it continues on. Night after night, restless sleep, not getting enough, not really falling into a deep sleep. So not only does the king distressed by the dream, but now he's tired. And it's going to make you react. I don't know about you, but when I'm tired and loss of sleep, what's the best way of putting it? My fuse is a lot shorter. You know, have you ever been so tired that you snapped at someone because you were? You add stress onto that as well as a problem or an issue, and it makes it even harder to deal when we don't point ourselves towards God. But we see the decree goes out. King Nebuchadnezzar's just ready to wipe out all the wise men. He's just done. You can't tell me this dream. You can't interpret it. I don't want you around, basically. Daniel, chapter 2, 14 through 15. Then with counsel and wisdom, Daniel answered Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, "Why is this decree from the king so urgent?" And Arioch made the decision known to Daniel. So Daniel, who is definitely a wise man. There's no doubt in my mind that if we were going to come up with a list of individuals that were wise in the Bible, obviously King Solomon would be on that list, but Daniel was a wise man who trusted in God. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 16, so Daniel went in and asked the king to give him time, that he might tell the king the interpretation. So he's asking the king to be patient with him. He says, give me some time so that I may be able to go and get this interpretation for you. We see in Daniel chapter 2, verses 17 through 18, that Daniel and his friends, what they did was they relied on God to help them during this dark time. That's what we need to do in our lives as well. When we're struggling with something, when there's something dark in this world around us, we need to put our trust in God. Fall to our knees before His throne and pray. We see that in Daniel chapter 2. Daniel then went to his house and made the decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. It is so much easier to pronounce those later on in the book when it's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, though, isn't it? That they might seek mercy from God of heaven concerning His secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men. We need to realize that prayer needs to be our first line of defense. When there's issues that surround us, we need to be speaking to God. You know, God wants us to pray no matter what our circumstance is. God wants us to pray when things are good. God wants us to pray when times are troubling. Philippians 4 and verse 6 and 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 7, we see a couple of verses from the New Testament written by the Apostle Paul. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything pray and supplication with thanksgiving. Let your requests be known to God. 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 17, pray without ceasing. We need to make sure that this is where we are. This is what we do in our lives. We should always be focused on our prayers. We should pray for others as well. Colossians 4, 2 through 3. Continue earnestly in prayer, being vigilant in it with thanksgiving. Meanwhile, praying also for us that God would open to us a door for the word to speak the mysteries of Christ, for which I am also in chains. You know, up to Daniel chapter 2, verses 14 through 16, Daniel had not interpreted any dreams. He had gone to the king and requested some time. He had then gone to God in prayer. We need to go boldly before the throne of God. And what I mean by that is we need to go to God's throne with confidence that He is there, that He is alive, and that He is listening. Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 16, let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. You know, James 1, 5 through 8, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. We need to make sure that we, as Christians, work on our faith in this world. There are so many distractions. There are so many things in this world that can pull us away from God. There are so many things in this world that can distract us to the point where our faith flounders. We have a great enemy. We have a great enemy at hand that wants us to fall, that wants us to be faithless, that wants us to have the same judgment that he's going to receive for eternity. We are reassured throughout the Scriptures that God will answer us, that God is with us, that God is for us. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, verses 7 through 8, "Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened." 1 John 5 and verse 14, "Now this is the confidence that we have in him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us." Now I want you to think about that passage there for a moment. Number one, we don't always 100% know what God's will is in this life. We know that He sent His Son to die on the cross. We know that His will is that as many of us will find salvation. But as far as things that happen in this world, think about Jesus for a moment. In the Garden of Gethsemane, praying to God, praying that if there's another way, if this cup of anguish could pass from Him. But in final there, He said, "Not my will, but your will be done." We should always praise God for answered prayers. Before Daniel went to Arioch and requested a presence with the king, he offered up praise to God. In Daniel chapter 2, verses 19 through 23, we see this here. It says, "Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, 'Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are His. And He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells within Him. I thank you and praise you, O God of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked for you. For you have made known to us the king's demand.'" Think about that for a minute. Daniel is now armed with something that is going to save his life because of God. And he's about to go in and speak to King Nebuchadnezzar, and you know what? He's not going to say, "King Nebuchadnezzar, I am your great and wise man from Jerusalem, who was taken into captivity, and because of my smarts and all that I know, I can tell you your dream." In a sense, that's the praise the Chaldeans and the others wanted. They wanted their king to look at them and say, "Look how great they are." But a humble man, a humble person, a humble Christian doesn't succeed and say, "Look at all that I have done." We say, "Thank you, God, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, God, for blessing me with the ability that you have given me." You may think that Daniel's praise for God's interpretation was easy because God answered him. But consider the answer he was given. He was now going to have to reveal the meaning of this interpretation, or this dream, to King Nebuchadnezzar. But what we need to make sure that we do in our lives is, as Daniel did, we need to make sure that in every aspect, everything that we do, we point those around us to God. How many times have you seen strong, faithful Christian people go through struggles and sometimes have a smile on their face because they know God is still there? We need to have that faith. We need to have that faith that no matter what happens here in this world, God will provide. If not here in this life, for sure in eternity in heaven. We need to try to make sure that we point as many as we can towards God. You know, one thing that I've always wondered about the book of Daniel, you know, King Nebuchadnezzar is one of those, I don't know, it's probably one of the very few really, really long, crazy spelled names in the Old Testament that a lot of people know how to pronounce. But you know, King Nebuchadnezzar is really a prominent person in the Old Testament. I know he's just in here in the book of, really just in, mainly here with the book of Daniel. But I have often wondered if Daniel's influence to King Nebuchadnezzar brought him to God. I really have wondered that. I don't know. I don't have the answer, but I know for sure, no doubt in my mind, that there's points in King Nebuchadnezzar's life where he's pointing to Daniel and saying, Daniel has a powerful God. Are we that kind of example? When the lights turn out around us, are we the kind of example that the light shines so bright that everyone can see God in our presence? Now, if you went a little further in this chapter before we bring this lesson to a close and you look at the dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had, it really was not a scary thing for King Nebuchadnezzar once he heard the interpretation, because it was the future. It wasn't what was going to happen to his kingdom. But as Christians, the interpretation from this dream should mean the world to us. Because the final kingdom in that statue that was described in his dream was the kingdom of God. The kingdom that was established through the death, burial, and resurrection, and the ascension of Jesus into heaven to sitting on the right hand of God. The kingdom that as Christians today we are a part of. But when we bring this lesson here to a close, when we find ourselves in darkness, we can choose to panic or we can choose to pray. Daniel and his friends chose to be a light by lifting up prayers to their God. I hope that we can learn from Daniel and lift up our prayers and praise to our almighty heavenly Father. How's your prayer life today? Do you pray to God on a regular basis? Do you maybe not just on a regular basis, but randomly throughout the day pray to God? I don't know, there have been times in my life where I'm just driving down the road and something crazy happens and it's just immediately it's time to pray. Now remember, just in that situation, don't close your eyes. Stay focused on the road, but focus your mind towards God. Maybe in the middle of your job, during the day, something happens and it's time to fall to your knees and pray. And it doesn't mean physically, literally on your knees, but bringing our heart down to bow before God. You know, there is a lot of things that we can learn and a lot of things that we can be encouraged by in the Old Testament, and especially in the book of Daniel. But as I bring this lesson here this morning to a close, we offer the invitation to those that are here, to those that are hearing this message today. If you're not a Christian, we give you that opportunity. We give you that opportunity to be baptized into Christ, confessing your sins, repenting of those sins, letting the blood of Christ cleanse you, to become part of the kingdom of God. Maybe you're already a Christian. Maybe you've struggled with some things lately. Maybe there's some things that have been pulling you away from God and you need encouragement. You need prayers. I pray that if you're here this morning, whatever it is that you need to do to make yourself right with God, please do so. Don't hesitate. Don't wait. But if you're here this morning and you have any need, please come forward as we stand and sing this song.